Good morning, everyone. I like that salutation back. Big thank you to Senator Warner for setting the stage for today and for his continued staunch public service and leadership. I think we should all give him another round of applause, please. So we're going to get to introductions shortly. I will just give you a 1 minute about me and our organization. I am Kathy Hollinger. I'm the CEO of the Greater Washington Partnership. We're an alliance of the region's leading and largest employers from Baltimore all the way through to Richmond. So our region is defined very differently than what the DMV often defines as region. And we have a table of cross-sector leaders. We have private sector, we have our education partners like Virginia Tech, we have Capital One, where we are today, and some nonprofit leaders. And the premise of our work, outside of the commitment of these leading employers to drive economic growth and competitiveness in this region, is to do so inclusively. And that by doing that, we will grow our region, we will be able to better compete nationally, and we will be able to compete on a global stage. And collaboration is critical. So our table is incredibly diverse, many sectors, many industries, really designed to consider how to problem solve some of our region's most critical issues, and to do that collaboratively. So today is very appropriate, given the panel that we have before us from different organizations and industries. I wanted to just make a couple framing comments. I think for decades, tech has remained highly concentrated in a short list of cities, probably only creating a growing digital divide. And recognizing that leveraging unique assets inherent in people, in geographies, in industries, today's conversation is really going to be focusing on how we reflect on the power of place and how top talent and innovation is supercharging our economies. So our esteemed speakers represent key sectors crucial to national competitiveness, and will share how their organizations are harnessing the power of place and collaboration to solve the world's most complex problems. So what I would love to do to start, to also have the audience get a little bit more background on who you each are, is to introduce yourself, to introduce your role, and maybe speak briefly to the charge that your role demands. And I will start to my left, we will go down, and then we will have a series of questions afterwards.
Well, thank you for the intro. My name is Lama Nachman. I'm an Intel Senior Fellow and a Director of the Intelligent Systems Research Lab. And actually, my role in that sense I wear two hats. In terms of the research lab that I lead, it's a multidisciplinary human-centered AI lab. So what we're really trying to do is advance human AI research, human AI collaboration, responsible AI, addressing some of the issues around trust in AI and deep fakes, as we heard earlier. But also, how do we improve algorithmic innovation in AI? The second hat that I wear as an Intel Senior Fellow, I actually drive the Responsible AI program across Intel, which I started back in 2017. And really, that is about ensuring that everything that we're developing responsibly. So bringing in the internal governance, ensuring that we have principles and ethical impact assessments, and building the capacity within the organization to ensure that that actually happens.
That's great.
So thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Senator Warner, and thank you, Virginia Tech, for hosting. My name is Young, but you can see, I think that's literally the longest title that you will ever see in the Pentagon. And y'all are probably like, what does that even mean? So I'll try my best to explain it. But really, at the end of the day, my role is to really look over the acquisition, logistics, and the technology for the Army. And so if you think about that, this fiscal year, $71 billion. So if you think about any weapons platforms, business systems, ERP implementations, cyber systems, AI systems, anything that we are either building, buying, developing, or integrating falls under our purview. And my role specifically is really to drive the Army modernization. But more importantly, all of that is really underpinned by digital transformation. And so I joke that I'm a commercial industry person with product development background. I was really brought in to put the T, or the technology, back in ASALT. But really, it's really to drive that change here. I think the panel is a great panel because a little bit of my background, I'm local, but I also grew up in the whole internet days. So when Senator Warner was talking about that and the disruption that created, we're in the precipice now of AI being that similar thing. And so again, being a local person, focusing on national security, I think there's huge implications. So I know we'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's really my primary role here. Oh, side note, the other thing I always joke to my wife is like, oh, I'm the world's largest legal arms dealer.
It's going to be very hard to beat that. So, good morning, everyone, and what a lovely, beautiful space that we are in today to talk about these disruptive technologies. Thank you, Senator Warner and Virginia Tech for having this panel, and also wonderful set of talks and panels later on today. My name is Subha Madhavan. I head up a global team for AI, ML, quantitative, and digital sciences within Pfizer R&D. And I'm told that I'm one of the few that's representing the life sciences and healthcare industry today, and really delighted to do that and kick us off here. So as a global leader in AI, ML within Pfizer R&D, I'm responsible for 3 primary functions. The first one we call as clinical AI, ML, where I don't need to belabor this point, but our drugs and devices touch millions and millions of patients globally. So we have the responsibility, along with other biopharma, to really look at data and digital technologies very carefully when we make our breakthrough medicines, right? So what we do is, so take, for example, COVID vaccine, the first iteration of COVID vaccine. Can we look at the clinical data, the real world data, how are people using these data sets to then inform the next generation of treatments, the next generation of vaccines? So that's one pillar. The second pillar, enabled by some of the latest developments in generative AI, is what we call as operational AI. So as you can imagine, we are an extremely regulated and a compliant industry. We submit hundreds of documents to regulators almost on a daily basis. So the question we are asking within our teams is, can AI be a co-pilot? Can it be a supportive and an augmenting tool that we can leverage to make our processes more efficient, so that we don't have to spend years developing these drugs, and we can actually crunch that timeline and bring these breakthrough medicines to patients faster? Last but not least, I have a function that primarily focuses on devices and wearables. And this is, Senator Warner mentioned, we're all moving towards a mobile-first world. So we think very hard about how do we bring clinical trials to patients at their homes, where patients are in their natural setting, so that you don't have to come to a clinical center every time you need a blood draw, every time you need a data point that's read out. So those of you who are wearing your Apple Watches, your Fitbits, et cetera, can we use those technologies to really capture very important information that can tell us about efficacy and safety of these drugs? So we'll dive into some of that a little bit more. Really delighted to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you for all being here. Very impressive backgrounds. My first question is to you, Jung. I'm going to get into the Pentagon a little bit here. As you are well aware, we live in this incredible region. We have tremendous assets, very diverse. We are at the intersection of public and private innovation, including your office at the Pentagon. How can our region continue to seize the opportunities made possible by our strategic location, our strong, very diverse talent base, and partners to advance national security?
Yeah, thanks for the question. And I think actually Senator Warner did a great job kind of teeing up the context, right? The national security implications, as well as kind of how we look at our threats and our peer threats, are critical. And again, the adoption of technology is a way that the Army and DoD sees that we can actually give capabilities to our soldiers, sailors and airmen, but soldiers for us, for the Army, so we can have an unfair advantage around our threats and our peer threats. And so the context, I think, is critical. But going back to like what, the whole power of workplace in this region, I grew up in Baltimore, right? And then I went to college, and then I went to the Army, and then I came and settled back here. And I settled back here during literally the internet days, the dot-coms, the tech. And guess what? This region was known. We had all the tech companies as it related to internet, right? We had all the telecom companies, we had a lot of the dot-coms, and I feel like there's great amounts of ecosystems across the country that the Senator alluded to, right? Whether it's the Valley or Seattle or Austin or Boston and those areas. But I feel like right now is the time to really embrace this next wave and pull on the talent that's locally here. And so that's why I think for us it's important. We are obviously in the Pentagon. We are working right now with Virginia Tech, our partners here, to really capitalize on several initiatives where we're actually supercharging this notion of creating another ecosystem locally, right, to draw the best talent here, because why would the Army care about that? Well, and y'all might be like, well, no offense, the Army aren't quite as technical as maybe the Air Force or some of these other organizations, right? You're right. I'm a dumb guy that used to jump out of planes. But if you think about the context of that is like artificial intelligence is very bespoke and it's created in the labs. For us to scale that and to operationalize that, guess what? The Army is the biggest consumer and will maintain to be the biggest consumer of AI in the services, in DoD, I would actually say across the government, right? Because we don't have those huge ships and boats or planes. Our resources are our people, our soldiers, and we have to be able to operationalize that, right? Not in a lab, not in a bespoke way that we're training or doing inference on an algorithm, but how do we actually make that apply real world for our soldiers? So again, for us, we really believe that the Army has to take a leadership role. We think that, again, drawing the right type of talent that are already here, that are across multiple industries. We have healthcare, we have the tech sector, we have Capital One and like the financial sectors. We have all of these incredible organizations. We have all the headquarters, or not headquarters, but a lot of these offices down the Dulles corridor. If we can mobilize and work together with the DoD for national security, that's our vision. And again, we have some exciting news that you'll probably be hearing about in the upcoming future about this notion of how do we create an Army digital city in this area, right? Leveraging our partners like Virginia Tech, leveraging the Crystal City area, leveraging the Pentagon that's already here, and how can industry come in to really help that? And so again, our vision is not to recreate these ecosystems in other cities, right? Or these ecosystems of startups and incubators and accelerators. We know that we already have that and we're tapping into that. It's really about what I said earlier. How do we operationalize? How do we scale? And how do we actually supercharge this for the next wave so we can actually give our soldiers unfair advantage against our peer threats?
I think that's so important as we think about people in our region, think about pathways, opportunities, cultivating that talent here. As you were saying, we have 40 plus academic institutions, 2-year, 4-year institutions right here, where I think the idea is to be able to keep that talent rather than export them elsewhere. So thank you, that was fantastic. Lama, I'm gonna turn to you for a moment as we talk a little bit more about the model of collaboration and we talk a little bit about choice in place and intentional investment. So can you share Intel's vision for collaboration? This is a 2-part question. The vision for collaboration with leading academic, industry, and government organizations to accelerate the development and scale, the impact of emerging technologies aimed at solving some of the world's most pressing problems, and also as we think about place and intentional investment, to maybe speak a little bit about the key factors that spurred Intel's decision and investment in Ohio State, in the state of Ohio.
Okay. So maybe let me, to start with, talk more broadly about our approach. So, Intel has been for decades investing in university research and really bringing a lot of collaboration among researchers in different academic institutions through, funding different types of areas of research. So, anything from semiconductor research, materials, AI, quantum computing. I mean, the range of areas that we actually tackle at Intel are huge, and we've really leaned into funding that through a lot of university collaboration. And we have different models by which we do that, right? We work with NSF, we work with SRC. We also establish Intel Science and Technology Centers at different universities. And really there we try to bring in multidisciplinary work across different institutions through these science and technology centers. And what we've seen is that these type of collaborations are lasting beyond the time frame of these centers. So just to kind of put that in like some framing, I mean, we're talking about, over the last 5 years, on average, over $70 million of research through these different programs. Now, you asked about Ohio. And as you know, we are building semiconductor manufacturing fabs in Ohio. And it's definitely, if you think about it from what you really need to do to enable that to happen, you really need to build the capacity within Ohio to be able to actually support that talent and workforce. And that looks quite different, right? So on one hand, the way that we've actually are committing to doing that is through a $50 million investment over the next 10 years. Mm-hmm. And that's specifically looking at multi-institution collaboration in Ohio. So both for advancing the semiconductor research and technologies, for being able to build there, but also to ensure that we have talent development programs within these institutions. So again, to put the scale in mind, we're talking about, even in the first phase, something on the order of 9,000 students educated, about 3,000 scholarships, and more than 80 institutions that are coming together to actually make that happen. If you look at the diversity of these institutions within that space, it is actually, I mean, the talent and the capability to build programs like that are absolutely there in that region. So that's kind of a big piece of that puzzle. One last thing that I would mention is we also look at that beyond just the direct investment in Ohio institutions, also as what are the other programs that need to come together to make that happen. So, working on, for example, technician-type programs beyond, just the 2-year and 4-year colleges and postdoctorate. So, building certification programs for technicians, bringing in like the university shuttle program so that people in universities can design chips and build them within Intel facilities so that you're enabling that work and that talent development to happen.
Thank you. Suba, Pfizer recently invested $470 million in its New York R&D facility as it aims to enhance its capabilities in the competitive mRNA vaccine space. Can you tell us about Pfizer's vision when it comes to investing in regional economies to advance innovation, talent, and collaboration, and how these might drive advancements in AI-driven health R&D, and how it would position, yes, the US, but also for us to learn here in the region as a leader in both innovation and global health security?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Kathy. Maybe let me start out by saying what are some models of partnerships and talent development that Pfizer engages in, and then we'll get specifically into the mRNA vaccine program.
Yep.
So I kind of look at this as 3 different but complementary approaches, right? So the first one is sort of your traditional talent development of data scientists and technologists that I like to call them Duolingo people. So people who are trained in technology, who are trained in computer science and mathematical modeling, but can also talk the science and the medicine so that they are effective partners as they engage with stakeholders. So how do we develop this group of next generation of data scientists? There are traditional internship programs at all levels, bachelor's, master's, PhD level programs where students will come and engage with different scientists and technologists at Pfizer. These are traditional internship programs. But one that we are extremely proud of is what we call as a breakthrough fellowship, which might be very relevant to students and faculty here from Virginia Tech as well, is that we start early. So these are students who are either in their bachelor's program or have just graduated from their bachelor's programs, and they come and spend and rotate across different labs to learn the data, learn the technology, and contribute to specific projects, and then are funded to go back to school to get a master's or a graduate degree, and then they come back again to engage in further research. The breakthrough fellowships are extremely coveted. They're very small in number, and so people compete for these, and that has been a very successful program. In fact, a lot of the key developments in some of our therapeutic areas actually came from these next generation of data scientists who engaged with other Pfizer scientists. The second model that we use, we like to use the term light speed programs, right? So the COVID vaccine or the Paxlovid programs were all what we called as light speed. So essentially you crunch the timeline, but then you keep the bar for quality and safety extremely high. What that means is you have more experts working on the program, you have more partnerships, and it really takes a village to bring some of these breakthrough medicines forward. So in this context, we run what we call as breakthrough challenges, right? And so, for example, last year, we ran a challenge to tap into generative AI and large language models to create safety sections of clinical study reports. Right? And so clinical study reports are standard documents that we submit for every drug to regulators. And we ran a challenge that had 21 different organizations globally that participated in this challenge. And 6 of them had very great technical output. We are looking at things like factual accuracy. Senator Warner mentioned hallucination and bias. How are we addressing some of the bias in that data? Where's the human in the loop? Is it augmenting humans? For specifically these safety sections and the interpretations that go into regulators. So this model, the second model, is one of rapidly running these challenges so that we are bringing innovation from the outside in, right, for partnerships. And the third, which I think relates more, Kathy, to the point that you mentioned about the vaccines program and sort of regional investments, where we call, these are, partners and collaborators regionally in that geography. These could be academic institutions, they could be not-for-profit organizations that engage with us. We have a program called Pfizer Ignite, which specifically targets small biotechs and groups that are focused on certain mechanisms of action. So for example, mRNA technology or antibody drug conjugates could be another platform. So we focus to be a partner for them, right? So we support the development. We almost in the role of a CRO, a clinical development partner for these smaller biotech companies in that ecosystem that really brings innovation on some of these newer, more forward-looking platforms that we can co-develop. Right, so I would say, the students, the challenges, and the regional partnerships through the biotech ecosystem really advances our mission at Pfizer.
Thank you. So we've talked a bit at a high level about how AI is really transforming places and industries. I want to tell the audience that we're doing a human wardrobe change right now. Rishi is going to close us out with a couple more questions as we zoom in.
Great to be here, and I bring nourishment. Well, this has been great, and you all have talked kind of at a high level, as Kathy was indicating, about the possibilities of AI in the context of industry and place. Let's land the plane and get more specific. Lama, you've led Intel's human AI collaborative sort of research. Can you reflect a little bit on specific use cases in particular that are animating you that might be of interest to our audience?
Sure. So actually, leveraging the power of place, so we are a manufacturing company. So I would maybe talk about human AI collaboration in manufacturing specifically. So, I mean, if you think about the complementarity of humans and AI, we've been really looking at how can we improve the way that people do work in manufacturing through this collaboration with AI. So specifically, maybe I'll mention a short-term thing and a longer-term thing just to put that in perspective. We have people who look at all sorts of signals, thousands and thousands of signals that come out of the pipeline, right, in manufacturing to try to understand yield and improve yield and debug issues in manufacturing and so on. And one of the things that we've been really very successful at is figuring out how to essentially bring AI to help look for where these possible areas of problems are, and then use that collaboration with the human so that the yield engineers can actually bring their knowledge in physics and everything else to try to actually, just focus them on the different areas where the problems might be, and then they can bring their intelligence to actually help zoom in and figure out which of those are real and which of those are spurious. From a long-term perspective, some of the work that we've been doing really is trying to take AI out of this digital place that it lives in into the physical world. So, being a human-centered AI lab, we do a lot of research in social science to try to understand how people do the work in these fabs. And one of the things that we've realized through that social science research is that people struggle with these extremely, multi-step tasks that they're trying to do. Imagine assembly of equipment, imagine fixing something, maintenance tasks, things like that. And so one of the things that we've been working on is essentially bringing all of that contextual understanding of the environment through sensing in the fab and helping people as they do that task. So imagine now a physically situated dialogue system that can look at what specific actions you're doing and then, help answer questions like what specific next step should I do, what tool should I use, but then also when it notices that you've skipped something or you made an error, it would ask, did you actually mean to do that, right? So essentially going from language models to world models, understanding what's actually physically happening in the environment.
Wonderful. Young, can you talk a little bit about the Defense Department's approach to implementing, sort of AI technologies and how they align with national security objectives, and with an eye on how does geography weigh geographical considerations as you make these decisions?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So a couple things. I think Senator Warner teed it up again well. I mean,
Yeah.
I should be like giving him some dollars there for
Yeah.
teeing it up. But a lot of people think about things like NIST and their role, right?
Yep.
People talk about safeguards and guardrails, and a lot of organizations already do that, so which is amazing. And so we want to embrace that as well as augment those things. But if you think about the context of what the Senator was talking about, responsible AI, right? That's something that the DoD actually coined, right? We're the ones that are driving responsible AI. And if you look up at all the policy associated, it kind of breaks it down and details exactly how we're thinking about it. But if you look at someone like me, I come from the commercial side, so I always think about implementation. It's great to have policy, but does that really mean anything? And then can I actually operationalize that or scale is what we're talking about. And so what we've done is the DoD is the only organization in the world that actually has put out policy that says we're going to have human in the loop, right, or on the loop, right? So it's not totally autonomous. The example, I think he was alluding to a certain company that we work with about the whole autonomy in swarms and it goes out. Yes, but we have insisted that we're going to have human in the loop. So if you look at most of the implementation guidance and the security frameworks like NIST has, or the MITRE ATT&CK reference, or even Google's, or even Databricks, it has really things around the runtime environment, which is great. So we've actually done that, leveraged those, and actually built another dimension around the human components of that. And we've published something called #DefendAI. #DefendAI is really a layered defense framework so we can actually look at risk and controls. And so if you look at national security, we can't just, no offense to industry, trust that you've put all the safeguards in place. But what we're saying is we want to adopt third-party generated algorithms as fast as possible. And so we have to work together with industry to identify guardrails and safeguards, traceability to their policies, but also have a way to trust and verify. And so this is out there public. We've identified 30 specific attacks. We've identified 60 controls to mitigate. They're not all one for one. Obviously, you could do the math, 30 and 60. But we're not saying that's exhaustive. And what we're saying is, here's a straw man. Industry, come and tell us, are you addressing these attacks? Are you addressing these controls to include the human dimensions? What are some of the other areas of risk that you're not sure that you addressed all? We can work on it together. And then the Army and the DoD can make a risk-based decision on how to operationalize or implement. So if it's a closed system, it's a lot easier. We can accept much more risk. If it's a business system, okay, maybe a little bit less risk, right? But again, it's a joint understanding, trust but verify, and we make decisions. But then if it's on weapon systems or safety critical systems or airworthiness systems, we can afford to take much less risk. And so those are one of the things that we've really trying to encourage industry to have better communications with us so we can actually adopt third-party generated algorithms faster. And again, we've put out policy around Gen AI to encourage people to experiment with it. but also make sure we're safeguarding data and security at the right classifications based on the level. But we're also insisting on things like watermarking, right? And we've already put that out there. We're putting more guidance out there around software bombs or software bill of materials, right? And then data bill of materials. So we can look at the whole hierarchy, fidelity, lineage, and traceability, and look at risk. And then again, beyond that is this layered defense framework, so we can prevent from different type of attacks, Trojans, triggers, inversion attacks, all those type of things. So again, we can actually adopt third-party generated algorithms. The other thing that I'll just leave as a teaser, we have this Defend AI, hashtag Defend AI. We're working on hashtag Break AI, and then hashtag Counter AI. And again, you could think about the security, national security implications of why we're doing that.
Amazing. Subha, there's so much excitement about the possibilities with generative AI and drug and device discovery in particular. What can you share with us from the inside about how this is going and how it works, and any particular real-world applications that might be useful to our audience?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Maybe let me start with some of the core frameworks, just building off of what Young was telling us here, and then we can get into a couple of specific examples. So if we look at the risk-based framework that you described, it absolutely applies to the healthcare setting as well. So NIST has come up with the security framework, the risk-based framework. So every time our governance body sits around to think about what are the right data, what are the right models for these breakthrough medicines, the question we ask is, where does it fit in the risk-based framework? Is it high risk? If it's going to cause any harm to patients, it's absolutely high risk, right? Irrespective of the data, irrespective of the models, is it going to cause any risk, pose any risk to patients, and it's the highest risk. Then the second category is it a colleague-facing AI, right? So the example that I mentioned, the generative AI producing a first draft, maybe the factual accuracy is only going to be 80 to 90%, which means that you absolutely need the human expert, the medical writers, to come and take a look at it. Now, somewhat of a medium risk, because you're not putting this out there into the public. It's something that's colleague-facing, and a colleague is going to sign off on this, right? And then the lowest level, maybe, we got 100 resumes for the Breakthrough Fellowship, and we're going to have AI sift through some of them and pick out some of the keywords and put that in front of our PX or our people experience team. We would say, maybe it's low risk, and let's use AI much more effectively and heavily over there. So that's one of the frameworks. And the governance was mentioned earlier. That's a critical framework for us, both for internal data as well as external data. So data is the new oil, right? Or whatever is the analogy we're using today. I mean, without good data, there's no good AI. And if we look at the data that gets collected in the biomedical realm, we have 40 million gigabytes, I think is one of the data points I read yesterday, every year that's being generated globally for biomedical research. If you put them on CD-ROMs, well, first of all, my son would say, what is a CD-ROM? Once we get past that, we stack those CD-ROMs with this data. You can go from the Earth to the moon and a quarter of a way back. This is just 1 year of biomedical research data. And we were just chatting about this backstage, is that it's actually not about the data. It's about the insights we can draw from them, right? And so having those right guardrails to implement the methodology. So at Pfizer, we have this system called a WOX platform. So we currently have about 20-odd MVPs, minimum viable products running, which are testing, analytic, as well as generative AI, and they all run within this guardrail framework called WOX. Of course, we partner very heavily with large tech companies, but it's also important for us to point out the need for open source and community-based development and testing as well. And the critical example that I would share here with you all is, going back to the devices area.
Yeah.
It's a new field. Digital health technologies, the FDA has just established a digital health technology advisory committee. They want input from industry leaders and from academics who are working in this space. It's very new, and the FDA is talking about potentially a demilitarized zone where regulators and industry and other experts could test out these models and algorithms. So it's almost like a sandbox. And so here, it's important to encourage open source technologies as well, right? So we've built a platform called SKDH, which is an open source platform and a set of Python libraries for analyzing device-based data. This comes out of your Apple Watch, lumbar devices for rare neurological diseases, et cetera. And once you put it out there, the software and the package becomes so much better because people are testing it, people are adding code to it, and they're using it. So I think there is a place both for proprietary software in AI, large tech, but also to really encourage open source modeling. And historically, the bioinformatics and the computational spaces have been very good at bringing forward some of the open source technologies to analyze these algorithms. So my hope is that as generative AI evolves, we will see not just the GPTs and the Claude and the Anthropic, but also a lot of open source models that we as a community can test out.
Appreciate that. It's amazing what is shared across seemingly distinct and disparate companies and sectors. All right, we're at the end, so parting thoughts. What else is top of mind for you all that you'd like to share with our audience? What keeps you up at night about AI? What do you think about as you think about the end of 2024 and the beginning of 25? Lama, would you like to go first?
Given the time, I'll just say something very quick. One, I think it's absolutely important to center humans. We should never forget that this is really about how do we amplify human potential with AI. Two, I would say we really need to be thinking a lot about inclusion in AI and who is around the table to make sure that we are actually building something that is for all of us. And the third thing I would say is we need to make sure that we're building sustainable AI. I mean, there is a huge potential of AI to actually help with a lot of the climate science problems, but we also need to make sure that we're not just tracking down to a path where we are, building, huge models that are not really taking into account efficiencies in architecture and models and everything around that. So my three departing thoughts.
Young?
Yeah, a couple things. I would just say we need help from industry and everybody around architecture, right? You don't have to throw everything on GPUs, right? You can throw, how do you optimize workloads on CPUs, GPUs, NPUs, LPUs? I think that needs some help, right? And then making that an open architecture to allow for different type of business models for multiple companies. I think that's one. The other thing that I would ask, Rishi, you might be able to help us here too, but if you think about software, it's very deterministic from a testing standpoint.
Yeah.
If you look at algorithms, it's very probabilistic, right? As we get closer to AGI, how do we test for that? Because we don't actually know what the outcomes or the behaviors are actually supposed to be.
You can't presuppose, yeah.
Yeah, so again, I think we, in the government side, we wrestle with that a lot. I think a lot of people just actually didn't understand some of that context. I think you get it. But I think as we get to AGI, I think we really need some really smart brains, big brains on a stick to help us resolve that issue.
That's really interesting. Subha, final parting thoughts?
Rishi, I'd say three things top of mind. The first is, really value. Like, how are we going to tap into these disruptive technologies to get to value quickly and in an effective way for all of us as a community? I think, I think everybody will agree that there is a lot of noise in this space, appropriately so, because we're sort of in the early stages of the Gartner hype cycle.
Yeah.
I think extracting signal from that so that we can quickly get to value, because what happened with ChatGPT last year was that AI and machine learning moved out of the realm of intellectuals and data scientists, and it became a tool for everybody. I mean, we're all writing emails with it. We're all checking our language in the paragraphs that we're writing with it. So it made it much more ubiquitous and more accessible. How do we use that momentum to really tap into the human talent and the technologies to get to value so that we get to that sort of equilibrium in that Gartner hype cycle? I think that's one thing we think a lot about, because every day you turn around and there are lots of new ideas, but there are finite resources and you can only do maybe 20 to 30 MVPs in a year. Which are the ones and how are we going to prioritize? The second one that keeps me up at night is really how to upskill the workforce, right? Because if we all do believe that this is the Industrial Revolution 4.0, then rather than being afraid of these technologies, I mean, we said, I think a lot of pundits said, well, radiologists are going to be gone. 10 years ago, radiologists are here, but they're very much augmented by AI. We've gotten very, very good at cancer diagnosis and early detection because of these technologies over the last few years. How do we upskill? So the radiologist who uses AI is much more successful than the one that's not tapping into these technologies. So how do we kind of expand that pool of human experts who can actually leverage this AI? There are centers for this kind of new labor economy that are thinking about this. So how do we upskill folks is a big area. And the last one is new ways of working, right? So I think what AI is now allowing us to do is to create new ways of working that can break down silos. Historically, I mean, I can speak from a biopharma and a life sciences industry perspective, is we tend to work in silos because there is deep expertise in chemistry, deep expertise in biology, deep expertise in how do we commercialize these drugs. But what's happening in the last few months is that ever since the advent of some of the generative AI tools, folks may not trust AI, but everybody wants to come to an AI-driven dashboard to see what other data is there that can make my job better, that can make my output better. So how do we tap into that to really create new ways of working so that we collaborate much more effectively?
Amazing. Well, in this era of hype, I think this panel, you all model sort of the right mix of passion blended with dispassion, sort of staring at things with reason and with excitement. So what a wonderful way to start the day. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.